I'm Clarke Speaks, the catastrophic injury lawyer. Welcome to The Verdict. This is 5 Failures from Success.
Hey, welcome back. My name's Carson Grace Toomer, and I'm here with American injury lawyer Clarke Speaks. Mr. Speaks, we've kind of, gone through a little bit of your life. Can you tell me what this third failure would be that, at the time was a failure, and now you are able to look back and kind of bring out positives from it?
Sure, yeah. It was an academic failure that kind of unfolded over a period of time. And so my brother had gone to UNC, and when he was there, he enjoyed it, but he didn't have very much money, and it seemed like it was harder for him because he didn't have as much money. Like I remember him he worked the whole time that he was there. I don't remember him going to a lot of, he was there when Michael Jordan was there, and Lawrence Taylor was there for some of this period of time. And he went to some of the stuff, and he saw them around campus and stuff, but he didn't go to some of the functions and games and participate. He certainly couldn't have joined a fraternity. I remember at one point in time, he waited tables. He worked in a sorority house, and he waited tables. And he waited tables at the sorority house in order to be able to have dinner, you know what I mean? And I remember, he would call my mom, and I could tell he was kind of feeling her out to see if she was able to send him some money or whatever, because he didn't want to put her on the spot and make her feel bad if she couldn't. So that struggle did not seem terribly appealing to me. So for that reason and other reasons, I went to a smaller school. I went to East Carolina. I loved it, loved the people, loved everything about it. And I don't want it to seem like I'm being critical of my brother. I hope it doesn't seem that way. He's great. And he had a great experience, and he was a great example for me. But just seeing that from the outside looking in, I'm like, I don't want to be the poorest person in this school. And it was, housing was more expensive, tuition was more expensive, books are more, all this stuff was more expensive, and it was just less expensive at East Carolina. And so, and I felt like I could be a bigger fish in a smaller pond and not be, the guy that couldn't afford to be there, So I go there. But when I go there, I have a little bit of a bad attitude because I feel like I'm smarter than everybody, right? I feel like I'll be able to ace this whole place, and, which is a terrible attitude. And it's not true, by the way. It doesn't matter how smart you are. You're not born knowing the, economic theory and, whatever books you have to read and literature and biological principles. And you don't know if you don't read the material and read the books and study for the test and go to the lectures. You're not. And so I didn't really do that. In fact, from the last episode, I was a chunky kid. So now I went to college when I was 17 years old, and so I was when I was a young 17-year-old. So I was now I'm in shape. You know what I mean? And I'm just having more success socially, and so I do all the things that and also I came from a environment where a church environment. So like if the church was open, we were there. I didn't go to church. Some people go. So you go to church? Yeah, I will go on Sunday. We went to Sunday school. We went to Sunday. We went to church. Then we went to Sunday night. Then we went on Wednesday night. I went to Bible school. They have church services on New Year's Eve. They have church services on Christmas Eve. We went to church. If it was open, we were there, and which is good. I got no. But now I'm away from all that, and also growing up. One of the good things about my background is, I told you before that my dad left when I was young. So that put me at that age in a position where I knew I don't have the same space, the same latitude that my friends have. If my friends get in trouble, if they get a speeding ticket or a drinking ticket or whatever, that's okay. You know what I mean? Their family will figure it out. My mom could not manage one more thing on her plate. So I had no ability to put that additional thing on her plate. And so that helped me, you know what I mean? It helped me keep me from doing things that I might otherwise have done because I didn't want to put her in that position. So in school, the whole windup of all this thing is, for whatever reason, I didn't study. I didn't do my work. I didn't go to class. Half the time I sold my books back in order to have money to go out and, drink beer with my friends and stuff like that. I worked the whole time. I was in. I did join a fraternity, which ended up being just a phenomenal experience. And the reason, my mom would have never agreed to it because of the expense. We couldn't afford it and all this. But she at some point comes and she's walking into the dorm to visit. She lived not too far away, and so she would drive over on Sundays so we could hang out and go to lunch and all this. And she comes to see me one day in my dorm, and the kid in front of her just continues to walk in, and when he walks through the front door, he lets the door close, and it closes in her face. And she's disgusted by this, right? She's like a Southern lady or whatever. She's like, you hold the door, and so he didn't do that. And then there's another door, and he let that door fall on her face. And she's like following him up, and he ends up coming. He's like 3 doors down from me, and then as she's going up the stairs with him, she sees his T-shirt, and it's got something terrible on it, vulgar or whatever, some kind of college T-shirt, as you may have witnessed. And she was outraged by this whole experience, and she's like, "All right, that's it. We're gonna figure out a way for you to join a fraternity." And so I'm like, "Okay," because I kind of wanted to anyway, and because again, I wanted an experience that was different from my brothers, just being the poorest person in the whole place. And so I do join a fraternity. Now, the benefit of that is a couple of things. First, at that point, I was kind of disorganized. I was more interested in having fun and having experiences that I hadn't had before, and meeting people and going out and all this kind of stuff than I was in academics or leadership or any of that kind of stuff, But I joined a fraternity, and our fraternity was different. Most fraternities, I imagined, had like an identity, right? These are the preppy guys. These are the jocks. These are the whatever, Our fraternity was different. Like, it was like we had just every kind of group or person. It was a lot of diversity in my fraternity. It was awesome because of that. Country guys and just, some of our guys would wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning to cook a pig on game day, and some of the other guys would come in there with their martini and everything in between. We had just guys from all over the place. It was a really interesting mix of people. But what I learned from that experience was, and we had some guys who were just natural leaders. You know what I mean? They were just leaders. You could put them anywhere. You could put them in a battle. You could put them on a football field. You could put them on a soccer field. You could put them in a business. You could put, and then they would just find a way to lead other people. Jeff Marlatt is a person that comes to mind. Chris Stewart is a person that comes to mind. Barry Oliver is a person that comes to mind. There's just lots of these people. Nelson Scott is a person who comes to mind. They're just character guys, leader guys. Darren Parker. These are character guys, leader guys. Brad Rainey. These are just people who I see over time demonstrate these qualities that I think are really important and valuable. So even though I'm not really going to class and doing the things academically that I should be doing, I'm still learning, you know what I mean? And I'm becoming more and more involved in the fraternity. So I started off being like Rush chairman, and I have to put together Rush, which is where everybody comes to the fraternity to check it out. And the first time I do that, it's a disaster. Like my ads were in the paper were so generic, and I didn't really know what I was doing. And I remember this alumni, Mike Schaefer, comes to the house, and he's like, "Who did this? This is terrible." So the next semester, I'm like, okay, let me do this better, right? So the next semester, we put up a crazy ad campaign, and we have some really, we put together a committee, collaboration. Remember, that's one of the things that's important to me, collaboration. A Rush committee, and we think about it from a lot of different ways. And we put together this campaign, and we have the biggest Rush class that we've ever had before or since, right? And the next semester, I run for pledge educator, and I become pledge educator, and I'm able to develop this big pledge class. And then after that, I become president of the fraternity, and and by being president of the fraternity, now I'm leading this organization of people, and it started out being like 21 people, and by this time it's like 80 or 90 people in the fraternity. And by this time, we're also competing. We're competing academically. We're competing sports-wise to try to get the Chancellor's Cup and all this kind of stuff. And so I learned a lot during this time, even though I wasn't really doing well academically. But in fact, I wasn't just not doing well academically. I was doing terribly academically. And so at some point I get a letter, and the letter says, you're invited to leave this university because your grades are terrible. And I was like, oh my goodness. So I'm like, all right, well, it's okay. I'm scheduled to see the dean anyway that day because at that level of, campus leadership or whatever, I'm connecting with these guys. And I had been working with him on a project. We were looking at integrating the fraternity system and connecting, the black fraternities with the white fraternities with the black fraternities and all this. And we were working together with these guys to build those connections and to build those relationships. And so we had been working together anyway. And so we, I had plans to see him that week or whatever, maybe that day. And so I go see him, and we talk about whatever it is we're going to talk about. And then at the end of it, I'm like, hey, man, let me talk to you about this other thing. I got this letter. Do you mind taking care of this, And I hand it to him. He what do you want me to do about this? And I'm like, well, if you could just handle it, He's like, I can't handle it. I'm like, you're the dean. He's like, you misunderstand how this works. I cannot handle this. This is a mathematical problem, and you have to address it. He was cool. Dean Ronspear, phenomenal guy, good friend of mine for a long time. I've lost touch with him, but he was such a good guy because he really did care about his students. And so I was like, okay, well, that's bad news, right? And so now I've got to call my mom. I've got to call my brother. I've got to explain to them what's happened and own up to this thing. So I do that, and then I spend the next few months working, right? So I got to get a job. So I work, and then I also try to sell insurance. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to be successful one way or the other. Maybe college isn't in my bag or whatever. I'm gonna sell insurance, right? I know people who are successful selling insurance. So I start selling life insurance at 21 years old, 20 something like that. 20 years old, and let me correct myself. I start to try to sell life insurance. So I'm calling my friends, and I'm like, hey man, have you thought about the future? And they're like, you mean like Saturday? And I'm like, no, like life insurance. And they're like, I don't know what you're talking about, man, but like there's a band playing at the attic on Saturday, so let's go, And I'm like, all right. So it was a difficult period, because I'm trying to pay for my bills and I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do. And I'm like, my friends are still in college and I'm not, and I'm sort of living there. And it was just like an awkward stage. Anyway, so Thanksgiving comes around. And so for Thanksgiving, we would always go to my aunt's house in Raleigh. And again, I mentioned this before, but she has this big, beautiful house. And it's like a log cabin in the woods, but it's right in the middle of downtown Raleigh. She would decorate this place so that you walk in, and didn't matter what time of day you got there, you always felt like you were right on time, right? So we'd come in with dogs, and my cousins would come out, and their dogs would come out, and we'd walk up to the front, and there's music playing that's like sort of consistent with the holiday, Christmas or Thanksgiving or whatever. It smells like pumpkin pie, or it smells like, Christmas, cinnamon Christmas, stuff or whatever, and beautifully decorated. She's got all the food and all the, and it's just such a phenomenal place. And with this particular time, I'd brought a girlfriend, my college girlfriend, with me. She was still in school, I was not. And then, part of our tradition is we go around the room and everybody tells some things that they're thankful for. And I remember at the time being kind of like disgruntled and being like, I don't have anything to be thankful for. And that's what I'm telling myself privately. Now, publicly, I'm like, I'm thankful for, my family, because I am. And I'm thankful for, my health, because I am. And then it finishes up, and my girlfriend shares some stuff about what she's thankful for. It finishes up, and then it ends up being my Aunt Susie, and myself and my girlfriend. We're just sitting there kind of shooting the breeze. Maybe my mom is there as well. We're kind of the last ones to stay in this room, and everybody else has kind of gone off and doing other things. And so she starts asking me what I'm doing, what I'm going to do after school, and I'm like, well, I'm probably thinking about going into insurance. I like insurance. Well, her son at that point is in law school. I have another cousin that's in law school, so the cousins, there's like, they're doing different things and all this. So she says, in fact, my girlfriend was saying, well, she might want to be a paralegal. And so my aunt turns to me in the middle of this conversation. She says, I've always thought you would be a good lawyer. And I'm like, well, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. And she's like, no, I think you should consider going to law school. And remember, I'm not in school. I have flunked out of East Carolina. And I'm like, well, thanks. And she won't let it go. She's like, I think you should apply to law school. And I'm like, chill. I mean, nobody here, not everybody here, really, I don't know who knew that, but nobody really knew and my girlfriend knew I wasn't in school. And she was like, you just, you should really consider going to law school. I think you'd be a really good lawyer. And by this time I'm like, hey, look, we got to keep this. Let's come back to this later, right? I hear what you're saying. I appreciate your, and finally I'm like, I cannot go to law school. And she's like, why? And she's like, I'm like, I don't have good grades. And she's like, so? And I'm like, now this is my Aunt Susie. My Aunt Susie is the most successful person I have ever known in my life. And she never worked a day, not one day. She built this incredible family. She had this incredible home. She had a ministry at women's prison for years. In fact, I used to go there for work, and I would ask people, and they, oh yeah, I remember your aunt. She was so, and she died a few years ago. But at her funeral was this sort of celebration, and so many people talked about the impact that she had all over her community, with the way that she had done things and the way that she had contributed to the lives of people in her community. It was incredible. So this is the kind of person that we're talking about. But at this point, I'm like, she just doesn't understand the realities. She's not constrained by reality, She doesn't work. She doesn't understand how this part of the world operates. The truth is, I didn't understand how this part, because what she says to me, I go, I don't have good grades. And she goes, well, that doesn't matter. And I'm like, well, actually it does matter. And she goes, well, did you know that there's a test that they give you, and that the test counts in some schools more than grades? And I'm like, what test? She's like, the LSAT. It's the law school aptitude test. And I'm like, it counts more. So one test you take in one day counts more than 4 years, or in my case, 5 years, of school. She's like, yeah. I'm like, that's not true. You know what I mean? I'm not disrespectful to her, but in my mind, I'm thinking that's not true. I'm still like kind of patting her on the head going, But now I'm sitting on the edge of my seat. And so she starts telling me more about this. And then I'm like, all right, well, how can I verify what you're telling me? Because I'm like, okay, I know that I have, not done my best in school, but I'm good at tests, right? I can do that, SAT, law, whatever. I can do that. So we go, so she takes me, and we go to Walden Books in Crabtree Valley Mall. And they have, the book section on the classes, the books that you might take that are relevant to getting in law school or whatever. And one of them was this Barron's book, How to Get into Law School. And so I get it, and I look at it, and sure enough, what she's saying is true. Some schools are 60-40, some schools are 70-30 LSAT, In other words, they weigh the LSAT. They place more value on the LSAT than they do on the grades, And so I'm up all night long until the next day, poring over this book, trying to figure this out. And when I wake up the next morning, I have like a completely new plan. And I tell my aunt about it, and she's like, perfect. Like it's no big deal. And I'm like, but that was the beauty in her. She did not see, when other people saw limitations, she did not see limitations. And she never did. And she had a way of putting her, some people would say naivete, some people would say confidence, What's the difference if you get to the same place? She could put that confidence into somebody else and make everybody around her think that they were capable of greatness. And so I thought that was pretty special about her. But anyway, so I go back to school the next Monday or whatever. And I go make an appointment and go see my buddy, the dean. And I tell him about this plan, I don't know what his reaction is going to be. But he tells me about another kid that he had mentored that had a very, very similar story. And he's like, all right, so now you got a plan. Here's what you need to do. And so he and I map out this plan together where I'm going to, take as many hours as I can take, have extra classes, go to school in the summer, and do all this in a condensed time. And so that's what I did. And I never made another B in college. I never made another B the whole time I was there. And so I finish college, graduate from college, and apply to law school. And so I remember I still was like, that first part was so bad. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get in. We had a connection with one of my pastors as a kid was somehow connected to Wake Forest and Duke and Campbell and all the law schools, just from his academic background. So we always heard, hey, it's not what you know, it's who you know. So I reach out to him and I send him a letter and say, hey, can I come talk to you? I want to try. So he writes me back and we agree on a time and I come to see him. And I got to drive like 6 hours to see the guy. I sit down with him. He says, well, why do you want to be a lawyer? And I tell him, this is why I want to be. I prepared for the whole deal. I tell him why I want to be a lawyer. And he's like, okay. And he goes, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write these guys and, I feel good about it, And so when I'm leaving his house, I'm so excited because I'm like, this has worked exactly like it should have. And so, you ever see the movie Jerry Maguire? You know this movie? I'm sure your dad has made you watch it, right? So remember when he signs Cush and then he's leaving Cush's house and he's like flipping through the dial and he's trying to find a song where he can just roll the windows down and belt out the song or whatever. So I'm trying to do the same thing, right? So in the movie, he finds Tom Petty Free Fallin', right? In my world, all I can find, what I find is Whitney Houston, I Will Always Love You. And so I'm driving out of this guy's town back to where I am. Windows down, all four windows down, and I'm belting out, I Will Always Love You. It's to the top of my lungs. So I'm like, yes, I've done this thing. I'm going to get in. So I go back to my mom's house, and I'm in my and it's weeks. You know what I mean? I've applied and all this, and it's weeks before I hear back. To the point where the guy that delivered the mail, I would see him. I would know what time he was coming. He would see me, and he'd be like, "Not today," because he would know that there was. And I'm looking for a fat envelope instead of a small envelope. Time goes on. Finally, the day arrives. He's like, and it's a small envelope. He knows just as well as I do because we've discussed this like in his route for weeks at this point. I sit in my car. I didn't want to go inside. I didn't want my mom to be disappointed. I opened it up. Sure enough, you're rejected. So I'm like, faith is a thing for me. It's part of my life. Feel like I'm in constant communication with God. So I'm like, what's the point, man? Why'd you let me get this far? And then just to say no and pull the rug out from under me, And I'm feeling really dejected about this whole thing. I got rejected from law school. Like I have finally put together a plan. I feel like I've got my purpose. I've watched To Kill a Mockingbird, 10 times. I've read the book. By this time I'm reading John Grisham books. You know what I mean? I'm like, this is who I am. This is what I'm supposed to do. This is what I was born to do. And now I can't do it. I was like, I wasn't just upset or I was offended. I was like, my feelings were hurt that God would have done that to me, even though I know now and then probably, if I was honest, that God didn't do anything to me. But then I started sort of drawing on some of these past experiences that we've talked about before, from sports and from life lessons and from all this stuff. And I go, just because they said you can't come to law school here doesn't mean I can't go to law school there. So I started thinking about it. Anyway, so the next morning at about 8 o'clock on the steps of Campbell Law School, I'm sitting there. And, the sun is peeking up over the trees. And I see the the dean of the law school admissions office. This campus has a big quad right in the middle, and it's a beautiful sort of spring day at this point in time. And the guy lives in the big house on the other side of the dorms across the quad. So he's and he's got it made, by the way. He doesn't seem like he has a very difficult job. He's happy all the time. His family lives there. He's a big shot in the community. This is Dean Lanier, super nice guy. And he comes walking across the campus, and he's like, sees people and waving at everybody and got his coffee and all. And he sees me. He gets right up to the steps, and he sees me sitting there. He's like, the school's not in session, so he's not expecting anybody to be there, And so he walks a little farther and goes inside, and I see him through the glass, I see him talking to the receptionist, And I come on in and wait. I've already told her, hey, I want to see this guy. I'd like to see him. And she says, okay. We'll see what he can do. So I sit there for hours, sitting in the reception room. Nobody's coming in and out of this place. Every now and then I see him go to his blinds and do like this. And he's waiting for me to leave. And I'm like, I'm not leaving. I'll be back here tomorrow and the next day and the next day, and I'm not leaving. At some point, I guess he gets the picture that I'm not dangerous, right? And I'm not going to, and he goes, all right, come on in. So he's like, what is it I can do for you? And I'm like, you sent me this. And he grabs it, glasses, again. And, what do you want me to do about this? And I'm like, this is what I'm supposed to do. I've talked to God about this. I have looked at and this is what I'm supposed to do. And I know that you see this one number, but the test was great. The number was bad. The grades were bad. But I want you to go back and look at the whole picture, right? You're looking at I'm not defined by one number. I want you to look. And what you'll do is, if you look, is you'll see a place where I was goofing off, and then when I got serious. And what I'm telling you is the time when I got serious is much more a reflection of what I'm capable of than the time when I'm goofing off. And so he looks at it, and he spends some time looking at it with me. And then he takes his glasses off, and he says, all right, well, if I could get you a spot, how long would it take you to get here? How much notice would you need? And I said, it takes me 2 hours to get from my house to here. And he said, all right, I'll let you know. And a couple weeks later, I get a letter, and he says, you can't come to school here this fall. You can't do it. But what you can do is you can come next year. And we're having a program next summer where we're going to let in, it was called this performance-based admission program. They let in like 100 kids, and like 25 of them get in, 25 of them get in. And so that's what I did the next year. Interesting thing about that is some of the best lawyers in the state of North Carolina went through that same program with me. I mean, phenomenal lawyers. David Corey out of Fayetteville, John Bircher out of New Bern, just Aaron Shaw out of New York. Just phenomenal lawyers came out of that program. Russ Bryan, who just some very smart character, talented. Robert Jones, a federal magistrate judge here, who is a brilliant person. So a lot of people came out of that program. But during that year, I didn't have anything to do, and so what I did was I went back to school, and I went into MBA school, business school, and I did business MBA classes during that period of time, which serves me well now. So again, there's blessings in all this. So the wind-up of the whole thing is, and then from there I ended up getting in law school. But this whole experience of not being accepted right off the bat, and having to do things a little bit differently in a sort of a circuitous fashion has been unbelievably helpful to me in my career. If I'd have just got straight in, I never would have appreciated it. I wouldn't have taken advantage of these different opportunities. I wouldn't have confidence to be able to do some of the things that I've been able to do. But now, if I get something that seems like a no, I'm like, so you're saying there's a chance, And I'm like, all right, let's do it. So I don't usually hear in my professional life no, or this can't be done, or we're not, you know what I mean? Like, because I know that if I can recircle, regroup, reevaluate, collaborate, and do the things that I do, that might be able to change the outcome or influence the outcome of this situation. And that's why that curse, or that curse is a strong word, but that's why what I perceived was a terrible thing, a tragic thing, an awful thing, turned out to be one of the biggest blessings of my life.
Right. So, if you could kind of summarize what your mindset when applying for law school, when you talk to one of the deans at ECU and say, okay, I've got this plan. I'm going to get, back on track. I'm on the up. And then, could you summarize that mindset and then summarize the mindset when, you got the envelope, not the big letter, and then how that changed and altered after getting the envelope, the rejection letter, and then, becoming a lawyer. Describe kind of how your mindset tracked.
Well, so sure, yeah. I mean, when I talked to Dean Spear and we developed this plan together, I felt like, all right, this is going to happen. I'm going to do this thing. And I was excited, and I felt encouraged, and I felt confident, and I felt strong. And then when it didn't happen the way that I thought it should happen, I felt discouraged and betrayed and rejected and disappointed, And then I was able to look back and draw on some other failure successes that I've had in life, some other examples that I've seen from other people, whether it was in sports, whether it was family members, whether it was my mom, and she had, had to work 2 jobs to provide for us to pay the electric bill or the house payment or whatever, or whether it was my brother who had to work, several jobs to get through school or whatever, and just have that additional gear. Okay, I thought it was going to take this much. Now I know it's going to take this much. No problem. I sort of drew on those examples and from those experiences to say, maybe there is a way. You know what I mean? And then that's where anything great starts, with the belief that something can be done. Even if it doesn't make sense to everybody else. I mean, I remember telling some people, this is what my plan is. I remember telling a roommate in particular, this is what my plan is. And I remember him, scoffing at the concept. You know what I mean? He's like, you need to find something else to do, because this is not going to happen. And there are people sometimes there are people who care about you, who are genuinely concerned for your best interest, who will say, hey, I know what you're trying to do, but let's try to do something else, And we do that to our kids, I mean, or at least I do sometimes. I don't mean to. God knows I don't mean to. But like if one of my kids comes and says, hey, I want to be the next American Idol, I might have to say, listen, I'm with you. I care about you, but that might not be in the cards, Then there's another part of me that goes, who are you to say that they can't do that, Like, this movie, have you seen this movie, The Pursuit of Happiness?
I think I've heard of it.
So Will Smith is in this movie, right? And it's about this guy who's a single dad who's trying to get into the investment world and all this kind of stuff. And he's playing basketball with his son on this sort of rooftop courtyard in Chicago, I believe it is. I don't know where it is, but anyway, his son, he's got his son a basketball for Christmas, and his son is trying to is shooting and dribbling and all this kind of stuff, and Will says to him, he says, hey, listen, you might have. I was never very good at this, right? I know there are some people that are good at this. This was not something I was good at. It may not be something you're good at, so you might not want to focus all your energy and attention on this. You might want to focus your energy and attention on books and stuff, because that was what he was better at. And then he sees his kid be disappointed, because he's taking the joy out of his kid's face. He's taking the joy out of his kid's eyes. And And the kid kind of throws the basketball off to the side. And he sits and he thinks about it for a minute, and he says, hey, listen, if you have a dream that's big enough and strong enough, you don't let anybody talk you out of it, even me. And I thought it was powerful. I think it's accurate. One of the things I've been doing lately is I've been going to see a lot of these rock performers that I loved growing up, you know what I mean, before they retire or die or whatever, before I do, whatever. And so we've seen all these different, you know, Rolling Stones, and we'll see Back in Black. We'll see AC/DC this summer, and we'll seen John Mellencamp and Bruce Springsteen, all these guys growing up, you know. And some of these guys don't necessarily have the greatest voice of all time. They just have something to say. Like in the movie A Star Is Born, he mentions that. He's like, you know, everybody's talented at something, you know, but sometimes you don't necessarily have to have the best voice to be one of the most recognizable, influential, impactful performers or singers or whatever. And that's just an example, like if my kids trying to be American Idol, you know. I don't think they're going to try to do that. But my point is, for me to try to talk somebody out of their dream is a mistake, you know. And if it is a dream that's powerful enough and strong enough, and you believe in it enough, then I think anybody can accomplish it. Well, you know, one of my favorite quotes is by Napoleon Hill, is whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve. And I believe that. I mean, that is a fundamental thing that I believe. And I think it's important for people to do that. And sometimes all it takes is my Aunt Susie. All it takes is one person saying to somebody, I think you can do this thing. I believe you can do this thing. You know, I see something in you that is special. And I think you don't have limits, or whatever limits that exist do not apply to you. And that is a powerful and liberating and impactful lesson to give to people. So that's the biggest reason why I wanted to do this series, because I want to do for somebody else what my Aunt Susie did for me, and that is to let somebody else know who is hopefully, you know, watching or consuming this information in some kind of way, a book form or watching this or listening to it or whatever, that, yeah, you can do this thing, you know, and these limits, they don't apply to you. That limits are made for other people and not for you.
What do you think, you know, law school you learned, you know, looking back at your route to law school that maybe wasn't as straight and narrow as somebody else that you had heard about had gone to law school? What do you think, you know, you thought about it at that time, and what did you learn from this kind of potentially up and down road that you took?
I learned confidence and self-reliance, and that life is not, you know, you have a plan. You've seen this graphic or whatever that shows that your plan is like this, and then life is like, you know, and that's true. Time has a way of humbling us all. You know what I mean? Like experience, life has a way of humbling us all. We all think, at some point, we're going to think we got it figured out. Like right now, I think, you know, it seems like I've got it figured out. It seems like I think I've got it figured out. We're doing a podcast called You Are 5 Failures from Success, meaning I was here and now I'm on the top. I'm on the pinnacle. I'm successful. I've done all the things. I have all the things. I've built all the things. There's a reasonable probability that when I'm 80 years old, it might be the 9 failures that I've had to success. Because success is a moving target. Success is not a fixed place. Success is you know, again, my aunt was the most successful person I've ever known, and she never worked a day in her life at a job. Because, you know, it's this sort of thing that we're shooting for that we never quite attain, and it's different for different people. Different people have an idea of different. So the thing that I have learned over this experience is that what I want to do is live intentionally, not let things unfold, not let things happen, not let circumstances dictate my day, my hour, my day, my month, my year, my life, is to work backwards and think about my Aunt Susie's celebration of life and say, what do I want my legacy to be? What do I want to be on my tombstone? What do I want my children or grandchildren to say about me after I'm gone? What do I want them to carry forward from me when I'm gone? And how can I develop that plan and carry out that plan now? And also, now I have the confidence. Confidence, I mean, there is no word, because confidence in my mind includes a measure of self-doubt. Otherwise, it's arrogance. To know that I might not be right, I might not be perfect, I might make mistakes, I might stumble along the way. But I can learn from other people, I can ask other people, I can collaborate from other people, I can read books, I can study things, I can pray. And then from there, I can develop a strategy to get back to where I want to go, which is to have an impactful life that helps a lot of people.
Now, you have this, okay, I feel as though you're kind of conveying the message that through every struggle you get through, you gain some confidence in yourself that you can get through struggles.
100%.
That's you in law school. Has your outlook on the situation changed as you've kind of developed in your career and experienced it, like, amount of success, or is it about the same?
The circumstances are different. The challenges are different. But the general process is very similar, right? Now, one thing that is different is in college, I wasn't necessarily applying myself. You know what I mean? I was applying myself to the things that I wanted to do, which was going out and being social and maintaining friendships and developing relationships. And man, I had a blast, and I'm connected to a lot of those people to this day. I mean, that are good friends of mine who I love to death and all that. But I wasn't really career focused, and I wasn't really committed to a path, and I wasn't really committed to an intentional lifestyle. I was like, whatever happened, I was go with the flow. We'll see what happens, and all that. Now I am much more deliberate about the things that I say and do, and how I spend my time, and the pursuit of what, and the objectives that I pursue. So that part is different. Intentionality is different. It's something I've learned from mentors and people that I work with and associate with. The first guy that comes to mind for intentionality is my friend Damon Pendleton, who runs a firm out of Richmond in Norfolk, who is a phenomenal guy and a leader and a thought leader in my industry, and is very much focused on intentional living in the way that he runs his business. He operates within his marriage. He's a father. He's a very so like that part of it. That part of my experience now is different from before. But in terms of the dealing with adversity and dealing with challenges and dealing with obstacles and those types of things, it's very similar. And the confidence that you have in being able to know, yes, challenges will come. Problems will come. Failure will come. Failure. It's not really 5 failures. It might be 6. It might be 7. It might be 8. I will fail again. But I am much better equipped to deal with it, to address it, to handle it, and also to anticipate it and to see what might lead to failure and to avoid it. Or sometimes you have to take that risk. For example, one of my friends and mentors is John Fisher. He's a injury lawyer out of New York, and he shared with our group recently. I'm involved in these different groups of people that do what I do and are committed to giving their clients the best possible experience and results. He had a trial, and he knew it was going to be a hard trial. He knew that it was not a good chance that he would be successful. He was not. There was a defense verdict, and he was sharing some of his experiences. And what came to my mind was, you know, in the arena, the man in the arena. Are you familiar with this? But the idea is that the only way that you know defeat is by putting yourself out there and putting yourself into a battle, into a challenge, into a difficult, uncomfortable, unfamiliar circumstance. And at that point, you know, you may fail, and you may fail more times than you succeed. But there's value in that effort. And also compare that person to the person who never tries at all. Who would you rather be? You know? And so, you know, for me, and I think for most people, it's a lot of times not so much the regrets of what we did do that we failed at, as what that we didn't attempt to do. So I don't ever want to be that guy. I do not ever want to be the guy. And I can't think of very many examples where I have been that guy that didn't attempt. Even younger, before I'd put all this stuff together. You know what I mean? And like even when I was a fat kid, you know, it was the prettiest girl in my school, and I was like, "Hey, how you doing?" And she was like visibly disgusted by the whole thing, but that didn't change the fact that was, you know, my mentality. And it's that same mentality. And so I'm married to my wife, Nicole, who I don't know if you've met her or not. She is fantastic. She's wonderful. We have a great relationship. It's not perfect. We argue, you know, but it comes from that same sort of place of being like, you know, that's the person who I think is the most beautiful person in the whole world. And I'm going to ask her to go out with me. And if she laughs and is visibly disgusted, so be it, you know. And maybe I'll give her a week, and maybe I'll ask her out again, you know, in a safe way, you know. But so I think that it is the shots we never take that we regret, not so much just the shots that we miss.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaks.
Sure. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us to stay up to date with our weekly episodes. We'll see you next time.